apply to the work that you do?
Well, as you were talking about this, the first thing I was thinking about was when I'm teaching a class, or when I'm speaking, because I do sometimes a lot of speaking events, is basically I need to gauge my audience. What can they hear? What are they in a position in their path, their particular place in life? Are they ready to hear some of the information that
So
I
if
have
you're
to share?
talking to a room of attorneys, for example, you might message it in a different way than if you were talking to a group of
High school students.
High school students.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
You're going to use different language, you're going to use different body language even. It's a very different approach to that form of communication.
You know, how do you determine, because I think this is true whether you're a clairvoyant or whether you're, no matter what you do, we make some assumptions about how we should communicate to one group or another. What are the things what do we base that on?
Well, that was one of the first things that I learned when I started reading professionally, is to never judge a book by its cover. Everyone has a story, and everyone has something that you can relate to.
Yeah.
So it's about having that conversation of opening yourself up to really listen to where that person is at, because they'll always tell you where
So
they're
one
at.
of the things that you do, it sounds like that you're saying, is that you actually get curious and you
Yes, I
ask
do.
questions first to start to get a sense of how they respond, or the types of things that they say,
Exactly.
what interests them.
Well, not necessarily even that, but it's more about, are they in a good place right now? Are they having troubles? What are they looking for in communicating with me?
Right, right.
Not that I'm going to tell them what they want to hear,
Right.
but it's more of, if they're in a bad place, I'm obviously not going to load more stuff onto them. I'm going to be as supportive as possible,
Right.
and validate that, yes, I understand, I hear that you're in a bad place.
I'm curious about what kind of things do you get communications
What do people want to know?
Yeah, what
Love
comes
and money.
up? A lot about money, seriously.
And love, relationships, a lot about relationships, which is a very key thing in our lives.
Well, we need money to some extent to
Right.
be able to
But money is just a
survive,
symbol.
but it's just a,
It's just an energy symbol. And so the part of my job is to communicate that, is to let them see beyond, to not get stuck on this one thing and it's the symbol that it represents, but to look at what it is they want to create with this, so that they get past the energy getting stuck in money and put it instead towards the goal, towards the end result.
Yeah, I love Maria Nemeth's book, The Energy of Money.
Oh, yes, yes.
Great book, series of information. Really powerful way
Very.
to change your perspective, your relationship, actually. energy
Exactly.
With money. So, you look like you have something to say, John. I was going to ask you a question, but then I thought, no, he already has something to say.
Well, as a matter of fact, I do. We've been talking so far today
See, that was intuitive.
a lot about oral communications.
Yeah.
But written communications, particularly these days with emails and Facebook,
Oh, very true.
is kind of changing. And I was reading an article just recently about the confusion when people use an abbreviation that means one thing in one context and a different
Right.
thing in another context. So if I'm reading a joke on Facebook and I type LOL, one would assume that they know that means laugh out loud. But if I'm writing a card to the spouse of someone who has passed away,
It's lots of love.
lots of love.
Right.
And you better hope that the person reading it understands that, because if they don't, you have a real problem. And I can see with what I consider to be a condensed communications these days, where there's going to be some confusion, some unhappy feelings, but because people use things like Facebook for setting up events and invitations, you name it, and it can sometimes go the wrong way.
I was thinking earlier today, when I was thinking about communication, that there was a time when I used to write letters, and I would spend like 2 hours to make sure my thoughts and my feelings that I wanted to express.
And you'd rewrite
Exactly.
segments, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
yes. And how different it is now with these, especially Facebook, where you just post, this 2-word
Well-
or one sentence, and
Yeah, or Twitter, where it's even shorter and more
shorter, right.
abbreviated. You're not always sure what they're saying.
yes, yeah,
But
and text messaging.
yeah, and then
emojis.
you have emojis, and also even the and I'm guilty of it. But if you're texting and you make a spelling error, it's like, oh, they'll figure it out.
Exactly.
And I don't even correct it sometimes. And I think, how horrible. Mrs. Hinton, my 8th grade teacher, would be horrified.
What's worse is if autocorrect makes it into some
Oh,
word
and you
that's
don't catch it.
right.
Which happens all the
All
time.
the time.
Yes.
All the time. So, so communication is so complex in terms of all the things that how we try to share information or our feelings,
Right.
or express an opinion, and yet it can be misconstrued, misunderstood. It
Yes.
can be totally even wrong if, like you said, if it's in writing and you don't catch the errors. They can be pretty funny, actually. But so, as a leader, I'll give that example. How important is it for us to be watchful of that and to be careful with it?
Well, I think you always have to be careful of what you say, what you write, what you do, because people are going to perceive things in the way that they want to. I was at a seminar this weekend, and we had a group project, and then it was presented to a much larger audience by one of the members of our group. And I thought she did a spectacular job in 3 minutes explaining things. She used up and down on her voice. She used graphic descriptions. At one point she banged her head, kind of like, she's got an inspiration. And I was talking to someone else that was there with
Italian?
me. No. I don't think so. She was blonde. It looked like natural. But later on, I was talking to somebody in our group who said, well, she was kind of over the top. Well, it's because she was explaining a 1-hour topic in 3 minutes.
But I think that there's also something about perception that you have to gauge who it is that you're communicating with, because their perception is their perception. No matter what is being communicated, if they're coming from a completely different place where the words have a completely different context for them.
It's interesting because it goes back to this thing of how do you know when, especially if you're doing a presentation of sorts, because some people like lots of detail. Other people hate detail and they just want the bullet points and just the high level.
Right.
So you can have someone who goes, oh, that was just awesome, and other person said, oh, that bored me to tears, or I didn't get it, or whatever. So how, as a communicator, if you will, do you solve those problems?
I think that it's important to recognize that you are to act as a mirror for the other person, so that you have to read body language, you have to listen to auditory and visual cues on are they hearing you?
Yeah, even as a speaker, I think that's an important thing. Being a teacher for many years, and I understand you have been too, you may have your material set up, you get into class, and all of a sudden you see the blank faces. It's like, ooh, maybe I need to
change
think
how
about in midstream, right? You've got to
Exactly.
change how you do something in
Well-
order to get the message across.
I think part of it, too, can relate to the amount of time you have. The condensed 3-minute presentation, it's hard to read your audience. But on the other hand, if you're speaking for 15, 20 minutes and you see people picking up their cell phone and doing other things, and you didn't just say, we're going to have a dinner on the 13th, and people are checking their calendar,
Right,
but they're looking at their email, that's a big clue.
right.
And if they start talking to other people next to them, then same thing. And part of it is you're looking at them and seeing if they're staying focused on you or if they're drifting around or not.
So how do you learn from that as a leader or as an individual, as, who
Well, I
is
think
a caring individual?
I think it's done a couple of ways. One is live to see how they're reacting to your presentation, but if it's something that lends itself to action, you can look later and see if they took the actions you were asking them to take. And if not, maybe you talk to a couple of the people that were there and find out what the issue was, why they didn't react.
So sometimes
Maybe
we
you
have
never
to
know.
go back after and do a regroup or a check-in and get some feedback on what we do and learn for the next time. And we ain't perfect, that's for sure.
Yeah, but I think there's also trusting that instinct again.
Yeah.
Of feeling. How did this feel that it went? How did this communication or this interaction? Do you go away feeling good, or do you feel like you weren't heard? I'm very much about tapping into the body and listening to our innate physical knowledge.
And I'm listening to the clock, and we have a break coming up, so we'll come right back with more. Please join us again in a few minutes for more on Insights in Leadership in Life.